I'm so glad you're here. Today, we're going to be doing a deep dive into the root causes of narcissism. We're also going to be talking about why the persistence of trauma causing narcissism, as well as bad parenting, why we continue to really like to hold parents accountable to what happens in those early years. Unfortunately, it is a lot more, well, unfortunately, actually, fortunately, I think it's fortunately, it's a lot more complicated than that. And we're going to dive into all the nuances of narcissism. Where did the original theory come from that it is due to bad parenting, particularly due to bad mothering? And what do we know now about it? What's the latest research reveal about narcissism? So I'm really thrilled that you're here today. I'm Dr. Carrie McAvoy, a clinical psychologist with over 25 years of counseling. And thank you so much, Maddie. Hey, it's so good to see you here too. I'm thrilled to see everybody here. And I hope you guys will bring more in by sharing this today with people, letting them know maybe this is a topic they really need to hear, that they're interested in hearing. I just realized I'm looking up and see that my Facebook group is not going to be here today, and I can't change it at this last moment. I don't know what's happening. If you are on Facebook and you're here, please let me know because I'd love to know that you're around. But I'd like to. This is what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about the original roots of narcissism. How did it actually come about that we blamed parents for it? So we're going to talk about where that originated. We're also going to be talking about what is the truth? What does the latest research actually reveal about narcissism and on personality development as a whole? So maybe you're not narcissistic, but maybe you're dealing with a difficult person, somebody who's very impulsive, maybe. Maybe there's somebody who's just, boy, when they get upset, they are dysregulated and they can't seem to kind of pull it in. We're going to be talking about what happens with this. How is our biology influenced by development? And then we're going to get into why it matters if you have survived a narcissistic relationship or a difficult relationship. How does knowing this help you or maybe even affect you? So we're going to look into that. We're also going to talk about, if we have time, why the Western culture is so persistent on the idea of narcissism being related to trauma. Why do we like this? Why do we perpetuate the myth? And see what if we're going to talk about anything else. I'm kind of reviewing my notes right now. Um, yeah, and if I have time, I'd love to talk about how the trauma narrative benefits narcissists. Because, by the way, that just creates a ready-made excuse for all their behavior. I heard it so many times. My ex said to me, "Well, you're just going to have to accept this is the way that I am," as if it was my problem, not a him problem, when it really should have been more of a crisis for him. So we're going to get into that, and then if you stick around for the last 15 minutes, I would love to take your questions and really dive into whatever. Maybe you have a question about what we talked about, or maybe another question totally unrelated. Maybe you're thinking of the holidays and you already have some stress and anxiety about it. I have had several people today approach me, not even just today, this week. It's literally just been in the last 2 days, approach me about how to deal with grief through this period of time, especially during the holidays when everybody's in such a upbeat moment or mood. And what do you do when you're a parent and you're grieving? How do you make space for that and show up emotionally? So if we have time, please feel free to bring up your questions, whatever they may be, whether they're related to narcissism or not. Okay, I'm already realizing I'm struggling with. I have allergies this time of year, and I've been living in Texas long enough that my allergies have showed up. And man, this is the time of year I'm really feeling it. So I apologize for maybe needing to take several drinks during this. Okay, how did we come to the assumption that mom is to blame for the narcissist, that she created him? We have good old Freud to thank for that. He is the first to distinguish between primary narcissism, which is what he would see as natural self-love, and the belief that you're a good person, that you deserve to occupy space, and secondary narcissism, which is more pathological, maybe more due to a developmental delay or arrest, where you get stuck in an earlier stage and you don't progress into a healthy love for other people. But he had other contributors that came along after that, and boy, I learned a lot about these. For example, Heinz Kohut, the author of Self Psychology, concluded that it was empathic failures by the caregivers during critical periods. That because children really need mirroring, admiration, and validation, as well as to be idealized by a parent and to idealize a parent, that when these needs weren't met adequately, that the child's sense of self fails to develop cohesively, and that they develop this kind of propensity and need for grandiosity, as well as other types of mechanisms for their injured or very fragile self-esteem. Then Otto Kernberg in the 1970s thought it was because of a cold rejecting parents who were still admiring of their child's talents, but that cold admiration created a pathological grandiose self that defended against that child feeling rage and yet envy. So he kind of emphasized the aggressive exploitative aspects more than Kohut did. But as you notice, all of this is placing the consensus that narcissism was entirely developed based upon an emotional trauma and parental failures, which is what current research is now starting to refute and challenge because of all the great strides we've made with genetic understandings and genetic research. So, because of this, and here's another reason. This is something that if you listen to yesterday's podcast with Dr. Salerno, if you haven't, I highly recommend it because he really does a deep dive into genetics and epigenetics, polygenetics, all these types of reasons that cause narcissism. What he said is one of the reasons we've been so resistant. He even talks about it in the fact that there are people who knew about this for 20, 30 years, but sat on papers and didn't release them for fear of what would happen to them if they came out publicly and said, no, this is relating to genetics. Because think about this for a moment. In fact, I was just listening to a podcast interview with one of the leading experts into autism, and the question came up there too. Should we prevent autism through genetic shifting changes? And it comes back to the same point. We all get really uncomfortable about it because of eugenics. So what happened was when they started to make these conclusions that, hey, wait a minute, biology, nature is really playing a massive role here. There was a hesitancy to come out and talk about it because they just came out of the 1930s and 40s. And there was fear that it would look like there was an effort to go back to that, even when there wasn't. It was simply trying to call out a better understanding because of our growing understanding of genetics and its implication in personality development. So there was a real resistance to it, and it didn't help in the 1960s and 70s when behaviorism came up on the front. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. There's a whole bunch of B.F. Skinner, there's Watson, there's all these big researchers that came up that showed that you could train animals to do certain types of behavior. You may have heard of Pavlov's dog, where they taught dogs to salivate to the sound of the bell in anticipation of getting a treat, in anticipation of getting dinner. So what the idea was, and I even had a professor back in the day. I have a story, and I share it on the podcast about what we did to this professor. I said it was in graduate school. It wasn't. It was in college. We did this to the college graduate professor who was massively into behavioralism, but there was the idea that everybody was born a blank slate. It was called a tabula rasa, in the sense that you were basically an empty shell with no personality of yourself. And you were imprinted and affected by those early childhood rearing experiences and early childhood years. Well, come on. Any parent who's had more than one kid knows that absolutely not true. Every child is a little different than the other child. Some kids have a greater propensity for delaying impulses. Some kids are not, they're not very controlled about their sensory experiences. Other kids are extremely overstimulated by their sensory experiences. Some kids are really easy to soothe, and other kids are not. So we know that kids don't come out a blank slate. They actually come out preset with a lot of strong characteristics already. But because we didn't understand genetics very well, we really couldn't understand the impact it was having. And also, here's the other idea. We really wanted the thought that there was a single gene for things. Like you may have learned that blue eyes and brown eyes is due to one gene. Well, actually, we now know that isn't true. It's much more complex than that. So because we were hoping for a simplistic understanding of this gene is on or this gene is off, or there's a recessive here or the dominant here, that impacted a person's personality, but it's very, very complex. It's a interplay between proteins, hormones, interactions with environment, what's happening in utero, what's happening, how the DNA come together when mother and father come together. It's all these things that happen that really shape personality. It's multiple things that affect who the person becomes. So because of all that, we really then didn't kind of put forward the fact that that nature played a very, if not majority of the role in the development of a person's personality. So I won't now want to bring you up to date on what we do know based upon the latest research into biology and into personality development. So personality traits are highly heritable. Up to 30 to 60% have a genetic influence. This has been shown on twin studies raised apart. Identical twins raised apart are more similar in personality than fraternal twins who've been raised apart. We also know that the big five personality traits of openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism show substantial genetic influence. And that pathological personality traits show to be actually have higher heritability. Some studies suggest up to 50 to 70% for disorders like NPD and antisocial personality disorder. But here's the other thing, even though it's highly genetically influenced, it's not a single gene, it's polygenic. What we mean is that there are thousands of small DNA variations that collectively influence traits like empathy, impulse control, aggression, and emotional regulation. And that these variations have tiny effects, but when they run together or occur together, they create significant predisposition, which explains why personalities tend to run in families, but don't follow the simple inheritance pattern of mom has it, therefore daughter has it, or grandpa had it, therefore grandson, granddaughter has it. No, it doesn't. It does not quite like that. There's a lot more of an interplay that happens that creates these types of personalities. And here's the other thing, personalities are remarkably stable over a lifetime. And you may say, well, why does that matter? Well, because that's showing that your life experiences, your trauma, in other words, doesn't naturally shift you or change you. That we actually, by the age of 3 or 5, have a quite strong core personality, that traits that show up, and they remain pretty stable over time. And the stability of it increases as you age. So by the time that you're 30, your personality is quite set in what it's going to be. So that makes people whose development of a certain type of personality disorder, it makes change extremely rare and difficult, and usually requires extreme interventions. So even, for example, benign traits like introversion are highly resistant to change despite being very, very motivated. How many of you out there have been really, maybe you're an introvert like myself, and you thought to yourself, I really wish I was more extroverted, and you've pushed, but only to find out that it burns you out, that you actually didn't, you may have behaved more extroverted like, by the way, those of you that meet me know that I'm quite warm and friendly, but you don't know that the cost it's having on me, because even that we find out, I don't know if you're aware of this, that extroverts have a different reaction to neurotransmitters than introverts do. What really excites extroverts tend to be the neurotransmitters that have to do with novelty, stimulation, excitement, new challenges, whereas those that have to do more with calmness, quiet, solitude tend to be very energizing and rewarding to those who are introverted. So you may push yourself into those situations that maybe not be quite against, it may be against your nature, but it's going to have a cost for you. Then there's also a third factor, and I was hearing this again about, I'm wishing I remember this guy's name, Cohen, Baron Cohen. He's an expert in autism. I really should know who he is, but I was listening to an interview of him. He talks about this too with autism, that with personality development, there is a third factor that's beyond genes and genetics. I'm sorry, beyond genes and environment, that has an effect, and it's called a random developmental variation. This occurs during fetal development. In fact, they're talking about this autism. They're wondering if there's an impact on the amount of like the exposure to testosterone or estrogen during development, during fetal development. The brain, it actually has an impact on the brain, and is it possible the higher levels of those may then have an influence in the development of somebody who has autism, that shaped that person to have autism. So there could be random environmental uh, factors like what happens in utero, what kind of chemicals that person's exposed to in utero, that really nobody has any control over, that might help explain some of the developmental variations that happen. But basically, some of there's a biological randomness that we can't quite account for, and we don't exactly know what's going on. But we know it's not related to nurture. We know it's related to something that's happening outside of genetics, but it's also related to nature. So we do know that, for example, that brain structures of people who have personality disorders are different, are observably different. That neuroimaging shows structural differences in people with personality disorders. For example, there's a reduced gray matter in areas associated with empathy, emotional regulation, and impulse control. And by the way, that's not related to learned patterns. They're actual physical differences that about how the brain was built that's observable. But yet we know that if there's early interventions for people like children who are identified with these losses or lacks, that they've actually shown to change brain structure during those early years of development. We also know here's another reason why we know it's biology is because temperament precedes environment. And as I said, if you had more than one child, children show distinct temperamental differences from birth. There are different levels of reactivity, different levels of the ability to be soothed. There's different temperaments about how much stimulation they want or whether or not they're going to withdraw and pull away. And these temperaments actually influence how the parent responds. Think about it for a moment. If you're a parent who's been super excited about having this baby, you've really looked forward to having lots of interactions with this infant, it's sort of you're built for connection. And then you have a child who's withdrawn, who's not easy to soothe, extremely maybe irritable, maybe overstimulated, and they're going to like pull back from you or push away from you. That's going to really influence and shape you. I had one of my babysitters for one of my kids, one of her children for the first year screamed nonstop all the hours this infant was awake. I'm not kidding you. Nonstop all the hours this child was awake. I met the kid later in life. The kid was actually like in maybe in later elementary school and was fine. I would never have known this history of this child. She said it was so bad when she would come home, when her husband would come home from work, she would be standing out on the front porch holding the baby, trying to soothe it, waiting for him to come home because she was just, her ears alone and her head was just, pounding from all of this excessive noise and the nonstop distress from this infant. In fact, the neighbor said, "Oh, you're the house with the baby that screams all the time." That's how they're kind of known around the area. That would influence you as a parent. That would shape what kind of parent you are. You would probably feel kind of bad about yourself because you wouldn't find spending any time with that kid enjoyable. You would find it just not even tolerable. You would be relieved to have a break from that kid. And then you would end up feeling like I must be a bad parent because I don't want to be with him. Yet this is a child whose nervous system is so hypersensitive that and he's not able to be soothed and he just screams all the time. And it had nothing to do with her. He was born that way. One of my kids was extremely difficult to soothe and he woke up a lot. He couldn't sleep. He still struggles to sleep. See what I said? He struggled to sleep as an infant, he struggles to sleep as an adult. When I was raising him for that first year of life, I was up between an average of 4 to 6 times every night. I kid you not. I was up 4 to 6 times every night and I was working full time, finishing my PhD and writing my dissertation. Ooh, I did not enjoy parenting him. I did not. And then I felt tremendous guilt for that. Like, what's wrong with me? Here I'm supposed to love this kid. Everybody talks about this being the best years and how he's supposed to really enjoy the babyhood. I could not wait for him not to be a baby. He is, by the way, an amazing adult, but wow, that was rough. So we need to remember that temperament precedes environment and that these temperamental influences actually shapes how parents respond to children. So a highly reactive, difficult baby elicits harsher punishment or harsher parenting and creates this feedback loop. A parent doesn't enjoy being with the kid ends up experiencing a parent who doesn't enjoy being with them and is difficult to be with, and that just ends up being in this very, very nasty circle. So somebody just asked, is the baby's nervous system not impacted by that? Sure. Yeah, absolutely. They're impacted by it, but you're asking a chicken and the egg problem. If an infant came out that way, my baby came out that way, didn't like to sleep. Is that my fault that it didn't like to sleep? I slept fine during his pregnancy. I had nothing to do with that because I was a heavy, long sleeper. So it wasn't what I did during pregnancy, but he came out that way. I was actually, he nursed in 5 minutes. I'm not kidding you. 5 minutes. He gulped only one side because we nursed him. And then he would fall back to sleep for an hour and a half and do it all over again throughout the entire day. I was on, oh, wow, it was not pleasant. So yes, it is this really this odd feedback loop that starts to happen that becomes very, very difficult and impacts everybody. But we need to remember that temperament precedes environment. It really makes it uncomfortable for us because even just with that question, right, I totally get it. It is odd to think about the fact that maybe the baby's influencing the parent instead of the parent influencing the baby. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about why this idea persists, that we really get uncomfortable about this, why we like the idea that parents have a lot of control over their child's development. The other thing is this is because of this, we need to remember that because the personalities are so persistent and change is so hard, and this is the other thing that Dr. Salerno and I talk about in the interview, is that even when you're highly motivated, you're coming in on your own, you're spending your own money, your own time to make a change, and you're sitting down with me or Dr. Salerno as a psychologist and asking us, help you make those changes. Even under the best circumstances, change is quite resistant. It's not that you don't want the change, you want the change, you're very motivated, but it's very hard to make those changes because change requires awareness. You have to know that there's a problem. And most of the time, when you're a personality disorder, you think there's nothing wrong with you. What you're experiencing feels what's called egosyntonic. Let me explain what that means. Egosyntonic means it's a part of you, it feels natural, it belongs with you. You don't experience it ego dystonic. Ego dystonic is what you feel when you have a cold or when you're depressed or you have a panic attack. It feels distressing. You don't like it. You want it to stop. So as a result of that, then you end up feeling like this is me. Why should I change that? So it requires awareness that there's a problem. Personality disorders don't see the problem because they think the problem resides in you for not liking them, not in them. It also requires motivation, that you need to do extremely difficult work of creating change. Like I remember, I just said that people who come into the office who want change struggle to change and they're motivated. What about people who are not motivated to change? That makes it even less likely to happen. And then you need to have the capacity for change. You need to have certain skill sets like self reflection, being able to modulate and control your emotions, regulation. You need to be sensitive to how you're impacting other people. It's called empathy. And without all the three of these, then change is essentially impossible, regardless of the intervention. So, what does this mean for survivors when we talk about the biology of personality disorders? It means that you can't love, nurture, or therapy somebody out of a personality disorder, that you need to have expectations that meet the biological reality, not a therapeutic. You don't need therapeutic optimism. Don't send them to therapy thinking you're going to change them. You're not going to change them. Even I boy, everybody thought that if they can just get whoever they loved into my office, that somehow I was going to cure them. No, no, it's not what happened. Most often, those people came once or twice. They weren't motivated and they certainly weren't taking a hard look at themselves. And even when people came into my office because they wanted to, change was extremely difficult to happen. There were small changes in these individuals, not large changes. We don't do engine overhauls to people. We do more like oil checkups, like you go in for an oil change. So it also, when you this early, and this is the other reason it really helps to know this biology, for early intervention with children showing concerning traits was really critical because we can actually make a difference during those early years. I saw one of my kids really struggled with empathy. He was just not, he didn't wasn't showing any emotional, like affective empathy, which is a connectedness of an emotion of another person's feelings. You know how you get teary at a Hallmark card? That's a good demonstration of affective empathy. But then there is cognitive empathy, which is the ability to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. And he was showing a lack of really ability to do that. And so I remember I deliberately honed in on that and started to ask himself whenever he did something, well, how do you think that made your brother feel? Or we'd watch TV and I'd like Survivor, a reality show, and I'd say, how would it feel as that person when that other person did that thing to them? What do you think was going on in their mind? How do you think that? What do you think they liked it or didn't like it? By the way, by me doing that, it helped me help him get into his mind, so that into my mind, into his brother's minds, so that he would know what they're feeling. I'll never forget. It reminds me that they were out shopping with my late husband for a Mother's Day gift for me, and my oldest son said to him, he said, "Oh, remember, get mom what she wants, not what you want." See, that's a good demonstration. My kids were hearing me that that's what cognitive empathy is. It isn't about going out and buying a gift that you want. It's about buying the gift that the other person wants. But narcissists really struggle to have cognitive empathy. So, why then do we persist on this idea that trauma is the root cause of narcissism? Well, partly because the Western culture really likes this mythology of transformation and redemption. We really love the belief that you can pull yourself up by the bootstraps. We have it everywhere. We have it in our movies. We have this massive self-help industry. It's part of the religious narrative. It all centers around transformation. And what it does is it ignores the fact that there are some people who are biologically predisposed to harm other people. But it really challenges of our sense of the hero story. We like to think that there's this big arc of transformation that people go through. Here's the other uncomfortable part is the financial industry, the medical industry, it banks on the fact that we believe people are changeable. So we treat people if narcissism and other personality disorders are really resistant to change, then we can't bring them into the office and give them a pill. And we can't really, ethically charge them with forms of therapy that are not going to work. And I'm not saying not there aren't forms. There are forms of therapy, but most clinicians, I hate to tell you this, as a clinician, I know this, most therapy therapists are not trained in the type of therapy that personality disorders need in order to evoke change. That's a hard truth. Most of us don't. I would not go out there and try to change them because I'm not clinically trained to do that. I'm clinically trained to understand narcissistic abuse and work with survivors, but working with a personality disorder takes a whole different set of tools, and I don't have those sets of tools. And what about that massive couples counseling industry we've got going? If we say you should not, and by the way, I consider it unethical to send a couple with a narcissist in to see a couples therapist. It's not I hear it all the time, what a disaster it is. They weaponize a treatment against the survivor, and on top of that, they end up learning worse tools. They end up how to kind of pathologize use psychology to pathologize their behavior. They now use psychology terms because, by the way, I went into couples counseling and he manipulated it against me. And I'm not saying this because of my own experience. I'm saying this because you can go out and talk to Dr. Ramani. You can go out and talk to any other big narcissistic abuse specialist like Sandra Brown, and they're going to tell you the exact same thing. You don't go to couples counseling when there is a narcissist in the relationship. What do you do about all the self-help books promising to help heal the narcissist in your life? Now they're now not useful either. And then what about all the treatment programs charging thousands and thousands of dollars for NPD interventions? And particularly, I'm going to call out another industry that's massive and quite large, and it's all out of pockets, all for profit. And that's the sex addiction industry, because a huge amount of sex addicts are narcissists. Not all of them, but I would say a majority of sex addicts are narcissists. So what do we do with all of that? I spent money on that. I spent a lot of money going to an intensive treatment program with my ex that did nothing for the two of us. So it really hits us at people who want to make a profit off the idea that MPD is curable or changeable with a little bit of treatment when it actually isn't. It also really protects our belief in the parental powers that parents want to believe that they have a lot of influence. It gives them a sense of control that if I parent my kid just right, he or she's going to turn out fine. And then, of course, it unfortunately gives us a target to blame when things go wrong. And boy, you want to watch that. There was a recent um, TikToker who created a video about Oprah's podcast about going no contact, and one of the parents stood up and said, "What about those of us who have gone no contact with our kids? We get demonized." And I'll tell you, that video of that therapist taking a position went viral because the therapist took the stance of, I looked at the parent and asked, what did they do wrong? I came in there and said, listen, guys, this is way more complicated. This has to do a lot with nature, not just with nurture. And boy, that was a real, there was hundreds of comments to me for saying that because of the pushback on me for how dare I support a parent and saying that parent was not 100% responsible for having a violent child. She had a violent adult child. So we are really resistant to the idea that parents have a limited amount of control, that they actually have children born to them that come out in a certain way. And yeah, there are a lot that can go wrong, but a lot of it is less than the parenting than we like to think, because it was, remember, started with Freud, then there was Heinz, and then there was Kernberg, who all piled on and said, well, yeah, it was mom. Basically, it wasn't even, we had now have made it more tasteful by calling it caregivers, but we were used to call it mothers. When I was in school, we would say it right as it was in the 1980s. It was mom's fault. No, it's not mom's fault. This is a lot more complicated than that. So we're very resistant to the idea that this is a more of a nature problem than nurture problem. So resistant that researchers have been threatened, researchers have lost funding. There's also been publications actually rejected for genetic findings because we don't like this is really uncomfortable. So I want to talk about I want to jump into, because I could go on and on about why we fight this. Bottom line, we fight this. We just don't like it. Because we really like the idea that trauma is the cause of narcissism, not the fact that their nature, things that we don't. I think partly is because it makes us feel so helpless. You probably would say to me, well, if it's nature, what can we do about it? There's a lot we can do about it. Early interventions, but we're also working on genetic cures all the time. I experienced this personally, and I shared it again in the podcast interview. I sure hope you guys go listen to it, because it was really, really good interview, really full of information. But my oldest son was diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia, which is an adult acute leukemia that until recently, until the last 8 years ago, it had a 50% mortality rate for some of the subtypes of it. And wouldn't you know, he had the subtype with a 50% mortality. Let that sink in. But thank goodness, 2 years before he was diagnosed, there was this massive, discovery of the genetic mutations, that this leukemia was completely, entirely due to mutations, genetic mutations. They actually knew what mutations they were, and they had developed a new chemotherapy that was a form of gene therapy, essentially. So that's what he received. He received this chemotherapy that was essentially a gene therapy. It went in and eradicated those mutations. It made him very ill. He nearly died twice, but he is alive today, 6 years now out, 6 to 7 years out, and we can now say he's technically cured. When they do a biopsy to check him for cancer, they're not looking for stray random white cells that are mutated. No, 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 no. They're going in and they're doing a biopsy of his genetics. They're going in and drawing bone marrow out, running it through, sending it to the lab, running the genetics of it, and they're looking specifically, have those genes disappeared? Are they still present or gone? And thank God they've been gone. So we are already doing it for acute myeloid leukemia, and we're changing lives, curing people with this. So how does this cultural blindness to the fact that nature's a massive piece of the development of a narcissist, how does this affect us? Well, for one, it keeps us trapped in these relationships for a lot longer than necessary. Because the entire culture is telling you that hurt people, and that anybody can change with therapy, then we spend years, even decades, waiting for change that's never going to come. We also keep trying one more approach because society says we haven't just found the right cure yet. And we feel morally obligated to stay and help, because we want to help these people heal from their bad childhoods. And then we blame ourselves for not being patient enough or loving enough or supportive enough. And boy, I can tell you, this is exactly what describes me, is what I went through. It was worse for me because I was a psychologist. I felt like, I should have known better and should have known. I did know when I met him, he was a narcissist. I did that part. I didn't miss. I did recognize it. But what I didn't know was that it was going to cause me relational harm. Nobody had ever shared that with me before. That wasn't something they taught in graduate school. They still don't teach it in graduate school. So here I am thinking, I'm a therapist. I make change part of my living. I need to stay with him and help him with himself. Little did I know he really actually didn't want to help, and that I could spend the rest of my life waiting for change that literally was never going to come. Never going to come. Well, here's the other reason, is that this cultural blindness is actually being gaslit by the entire mental health system, because survivors here the couples therapist say, you just both need to work on this. Just this week, sat with somebody who had the therapist saying, well, I think we got a really good start and I'm excited about where we're going to go. I was very pessimistic about what I heard from the therapy session. When she told me what happened, I heard a completely different version than that therapist. I was not optimistic. And then we have individual therapists who encourage people to have more compassionate for the narcissist inner wounded child. We have books and articles promising the right communication technique is going to break through this person. And then we have friends and family who say, but they had such a hard childhood. And have you tried this or have you looked into that? So when you have professionals and family members and every expert telling you that change is possible, that makes you feel like you're the unreasonable one when you don't see change as being realistic. And you end up being gaslit, not only by the abuser, but by all the authority figures around you telling you the same thing to keep trying. And I also heard the church say that too, that you can save him by your love, because remember, your love and your devotion brings him closer to God. What about the fact that he was harming me? We weren't talking about that. Here's the other problem this cultural blindness does is it creates profound self-blame and shame, because survivors internalize the message that if their partner is not changing, they must not be doing enough. And that if trauma caused this, then their love is not healing enough. And that other people seem to help their partners change. So what's wrong with them? And that just maybe that survivor is actually the problem, because maybe they're just reacting to the survivor. So you end up feeling like somehow there's something wrong with you. And this costs survivors years because of false hope. So you keep waiting for this change in this person who's basically never going to happen, while your mental and physical health deteriorates under the chronic stress and pressure, because you're just trying harder or trying one more time. And of course, there's financial deficit occurs because you're funding their lifestyle, you're funding their therapy, you're funding the courses and the coaches. And of course, that all of this financially benefits the narcissist, but doesn't financially benefit the survivor. So the investment in couples therapy just makes things worse, while you're depleting the savings, retirement accounts, and inheritance, while you're trying to fix things, and while that narcissist is exploiting things. And of course, the narcissist is going to blame you for the problems too, because they know the society also asks you, did you try couples therapy? Have you thought about the fact they have childhood trauma? And why weren't you more patient? So all of that then takes the pressure off the narcissist and puts it on you. They're not being asked, why are they harming you? Why are they not taking more accountability? Why are they not being more responsible? And why are they not doing the hard work of being careful and respectful of you? All right. So again, I could just go on and talk about this, but I want to get into the fact, this one more thing about how the narrative benefits the narcissist, and then I'm going to take your questions, because somebody just asked, can I talk to you of those of you who've recently left? How do you deal with the recovery while you're exhausted? That's a great question. I hope you stick around for a few more minutes for me to cover this one more section, and then I'll take your questions. So how the narrative trauma causes narcissism benefits narcissists is that it's their dream come true. It gives them a ready-made excuse for all their bad behavior. They can now deflect accountability by saying, I can't help it, my mother made me. Or you don't understand what I went through as a kid. Or I'm really doing my best, as my ex liked to say, I'm just the way I am. You're going to have to accept me that way. Or I've never worked so hard, as if, what is he talking about with hard work? He wasn't doing any hard work. He did a lot of hard work to look like he was doing hard work, but there wasn't any hard work to actually changing. Or it also weaponizes it weaponizes victim status. Now they become masterful at playing the victim. They then automatically get sympathy from other people. It becomes a trump card in any conflict. It protects them from consequences. Sorry about that. And it makes you look cruel for setting boundaries, like you're not being understanding. And it keeps you engaged and trying. See, narcissism has that initial deficits, the personality deficits. It's like lacking inner scaffolding to hold them up psychologically. And they're using the relationship, they're using supply as the scaffolding. You become the person that's supposed to try to help keep conflict away, supposed to never upset them, supposed to do everything just perfect so they're never just distressed or upset. So you are the one who then becomes the person who smooths down, literally like smooths the road. You're like laying the cloth down in front of the road, the cloak down in front of the road so they never walk on mud. That life is just like exactly what they need. My ex used to say he had a fantasy. His fantasy was he wanted a woman that slept at the foot of his bed to wait on him hand and foot 24 hours a day. Talk about scaffolding. He wanted somebody that was literally kept life smooth, easy going, so he wanted for nothing. But by you then believing this person is capable of change and that this is more of a nurture problem, then you keep thinking that they're hurt and you just need to do the right thing and that then they'll get better. It keeps you engaged in trying so that you then stay involved as part of their emotional and psychological narcissistic supply. And it also provides this endless supply of second chances. Every time they make a mistake, and I heard this so many times, they'll try harder. They'll try a different therapist. They'll read a different book. They'll go to a new workshop. They'll start working on themselves. But all of that is just a way to keep you on the hook and keep you in the relationship while nothing on their part changes. And it also makes the abuse acceptable and explainable. So whenever something bad happens, you say to friends and family, well, you just don't understand what a rough childhood this person had. Or if you really knew what they went through, you'd be sympathetic too. As a result of that, you end up protecting their reputation by holding up this cultural narrative so they get to keep their social standing and image while continuing to abuse. Unfortunately, this protects them and it doesn't protect you. And it creates a community of enablers around the narcissist. It gives them the flying monkeys who see them as a wounded soul who needs support, or the new supply who maybe is going to be the right person in the relationship who'll finally heal them. And of course, then it gives therapists, coaches, and practitioners and to be able to build a career on trying to help them. And then there's family members who excuse everything that they do because they know what they went through more than you do. So, what I really would like to urge you as I wrap up this section and turn over to your questions is that please know that there needs to be, in order for change to really happen, there needs to be three prerequisites: awareness. Does this person, are they at harmony with the way that they act and engage with other people? Or do they see their behavior as a problem? Are they externalizing everything? It's everybody around them. They're too sensitive or they're unfair. Because if you don't see awareness, then there's nothing to motivate that person to change. So many narcissists go through their entire life believing that they're not the problem. The problem is outside of themselves. Look for awareness. Number two, look for motivation. It takes extremely hard work to make any kind of change. So if they become aware, are they motivated to do the hard work of taking accountability and responsibility? It isn't enough to say, I want to change, and enough to look good to other people by saying that. They need to want to be different for their own reasons, not to look good to other people. And that is very rare because their current state of looking good for other people currently works for them because it gets them what they want. Look for number three, the capacity for specific change. Do they have the neural capacity for empathy, for self reflection, and emotional regulation? Do they actually show the ability to do it ever under any circumstances? Look for the neural capacity, the neurological capacity for this. If these brain structures are underdeveloped or absent, I don't care how much willpower this person has, they're not going to create it. And then it's like asking someone who's colorblind to start to see color. How do you do that? So most narcissists fail to be aware. They really fail at being motivated. And it's rare for them to have the capacity, the biological capacity for change. We can start early. We can help our children develop these skills. But by the time you've reached into your late 20s and early 30s, your personality is pretty set. It's extremely difficult. And when it comes to psychopathy and antisocial personality disorder, there has been no documented cases of people with true psychopathy fundamentally changing. No documented research. And as Dr. Salerno said on the interview, if they have a capacity for depression, that might assist for some change, but that's rare. All right. So the brutal case is if you are in a relationship with some mild to moderate um, presentation of narcissism or antisocial personality disorders or any of the cluster B, it means they may have some capacity for self-reflection. They may have some distress and be a little motivated. There may be partial awareness, but if the biological predisposition is severe enough, they're going to have a limited capacity to change. So I really want to urge you to think about this when you think about being in a relationship with somebody with MPD, because that's the hard truth about it. You can't fix something that's not fixable. And it isn't your failure of being a supportive, compassionate person. This is really about this person's willingness to do the hard work. And you can redirect your energy your entire life to healing them, but you're really outside of control of this. And you really need to make your decision on the reality of this relationship based on what's true about it, not what's fantasy, not about potential change or potential hope. You need to see this with clear eyes. All right, guys, thank you so much for this. I know this is a very, very hard message for some of us. It would have been a hard message for me back in the day. I know that. I probably would not have liked to hear that. I washed my wig last night and curled it, so it's a little over curly right now. I don't like it this way, but I know that it will get better. It's one of those wigs I bought on a it's real human hair, and it was inexpensive, and you never know whether you're going to get a good one or a bad one. But I'll tell you, when I washed it, it's a very, very good hair. So I was thrilled to find out that it was high quality hair. But yeah, anyway. So let me take some of your questions. Oh, thank you, you guys. Thanks for the comments. So what's come up? I know there's a lot of you may have had a lot of questions as you listen to me today, but I'm super curious about what you're thinking. So, what are you thinking about this? I'm going to try to see if I can go back and see if there's any comments. Oh, and somebody just became, thank you so much. This reminds me, I am changing the club membership. So if you become a paid super thriver on YouTube or a paid subscriber on Facebook or a paid subscriber, all of these paid subscriptions bring you into the low level, the bottom tier, the subscriber tier of the Toxic Free Relationship Club. And that gives you the monthly Q&A with me that's exclusive for subscribers and all club members. It also gives you quarterly events. In fact, Dr. Salerno was our guest in December, and he did a 90-minute Q&A for our membership. So you could have asked him anything personally. I'm so excited. I have Bill Eddy, who's going to be doing for March, and I have a really great list that I'm going to invite for the rest of the year. So top people that you really would love to sit down and listen to. So if you become a subscriber, you then get immediate access to all of that. So here's how I think about the stuff that I have for available. So if you're really wondering what's going on with me and I need help, then you want the complete recovery. I'm sorry, I said that. Yeah, the complete recovery collection. It's a collection of 3 books. It includes First Steps to Leaving, Surviving to Thriving, and Love You More. So it kind of gives you a primer from being in the relationship to what a relationship looks like that's narcissistic, to all the way to those that help you heal after the words. Then if you're looking for day-to-day support, like really like good check-ins, AI help, you're looking for an extensive library where you can learn all about this. You can actually talk to an AI built on my education and foundation. Then you're going to look for Reclaim You. It's a new app that's being launched, hopefully in December. I'll know ETA soon, but it's due out soon. And it's literally does check-ins. I did a demo recently of it. Check-ins with you during the day. It asks how the day went, and that paces lessons for you and support exactly to what you need based upon what you're going through. And the more that you interact with it, the better it gets to know you, and it becomes even more attuned to really showing up exactly the way that it's what I needed. If I had that, I would have left that relationship. It would have been so much easier if I had that kind of support. And then if you're looking for live support, that's when you should join the Toxic Free Relationship Club. And there are 3 tiers, from all the way to where it gives you the newsletter and the exclusive interviews and the monthly Q&As and the guest interviews once a quarter. But then there's the community, which gives you interactions with each other. And then at the top level, there is the coaching, the live coaching that we do, book club, and the grounding sessions we do actually live each week throughout the month. So if you're looking for support, that's what I would recommend. Start out with the complete recovery collection set, then go to the Reclaim app. And then finally, if you're looking for something live and in person, then go to the club. So questions for me. You guys got quiet on me all of a sudden. Somebody asked way back, I want to talk about the question. I mentioned this at the very beginning of the live. When those of you who are grieving, and when you leave that toxic relationship, it does put you in grief, actively in grief. But maybe somebody in your maybe somebody in your life has passed away. And you're now going into the season trying to battle the fact that what do I do when I feel so out of shape and I can't even show up? How do I help my kids and really show up, be there for them, be the kind of parent I want to be, especially if you lost a spouse and like I did. You just feel like it feels like, somebody literally cut you in half and you're trying to like go through the day with only part of you. So here's a suggestion if you're really battling grief right now. I'm thinking of those who've reached out to me privately this week to ask me this question. Several of you have. I'd like you to think about making a date with pain, making a date with grief. Every day, I would like you to pick a time of the day that you're going to set a timer for 20 minutes. Find a time that's just your own, where you can shut the door and have some privacy. And then I want you to deliberately, on purpose, move into the pain. I did this when I lost my late husband. I would actually find really dark music and I would saved up through the day all the things that came up that was upsetting to me. And then I would deliberately think about those things, like on purpose, make it very painful. Maybe you can journal. Maybe there's a really painful, like deliciously bittersweet memory that you had that you can remember. One of them was for me. He wanted to live. We had tickets to go see Christina Perry, and to see hear 1,000 years. Makes me even teary thinking of that. He and I wanted to dance to 1,000 years, and he died like a week or two before she came in for the show. So I went alone to that show and sobbed through that song. So what I would do is I would deliberately like play that song and think of it and let myself grieve for those 20 minutes. I literally to turn a timer on and then let the timer run and then move into the emotion and feel it. What it does is this, it puts a container around your emotions. It literally boxes into its own space, a safe space, so that when you're in pain throughout the day, you can say, I have a date with grief tonight. I'm going to save that for that date. And it really helps you then know how to show up the rest of the day because you're going to be taking care of yourself during that date, during that period of time. So for those of you who are really battling this during the holidays and maybe you have young kids or maybe you're just in so much pain, I really recommend that you try this and see if it really helps you. I thought it was the dumbest idea. My therapist told me to do this, but I'll tell you, it was the most brilliant plan. It really saved me so much. I did it. I followed her instructions and I found that it really, really helped me a lot. And I hope that you find that it helps you a lot too. All right, I'm going to check the questions then. Oh, thanks. Somebody said they love the cut and color of this wig. I got two more coming. I use Sarah Scheffler. Her is Locks of Confidence. And Scarlet Glow Up is on Instagram, is her Instagram handle. But not one of hers. But when I get hers, there's two coming. One's a brunette and one's kind of an auburn blonde. So when they come, I'll make sure you guys see them. I'm real excited about them. Really, really excited about it. All right, questions for me. My mom died suddenly a week before my birthday. Oh, I'm so sorry you're going through that, Maddie. Does angry music at the gym help too? I think so, Mary. I do think that, what you're doing is because here's the other thing that really helps with depression and there's sort of this flatness or this sense of out of control, being really jittery, is to deliberately go for a walk, move your body, dispel it through your body. So those are the things that really actually help us feel better when we're all shaken up. Other questions. You guys my husband told me I wanted a divorce and he said we need to talk about I told my husband I want a divorce and he said we need to talk about our assets. That sounds like a guy who's getting ahead of the curve there. He's already anticipating how it's going to affect him negatively. What I recommend, Lisa, see an attorney first. Don't have that conversation with him until you see an attorney. Why am I saying that? Because he's going to give you a lot of information that's really in his benefit and probably is not based on reality. He's going to give his version based on whatever he thinks and whatever he's picked up culturally that may not be accurate, first of all, in your state or accurate today. So become informed before you have that conversation with them. And then really think through a lot about what it is that you need. This is not a time for you to be a compassionate person. Now, I know there are probably some people who are upset that I even said it that way, but that he is not going to be thinking about you. You need to be thinking about you. He can think for himself about himself. He can take care of himself. But I really want you to be very strategic about what it is that you need. And for a lot of us, for me, like very much for me, this was very hard. I didn't find this easy to do at all. I had to work really hard against my nature to be very caring and naturally self-sacrificing. And the reason he may be doing that is he's assuming that about you. I don't know that, but I would worry about that for you. I would worry that he sees this as him. He's going to, appeal to your supportive nature. So, um, so thank you for answering my question a while back about not being able to cry. Even my mom died in April. Now I cry daily. Oh, yeah, that was a fan mail question. Thank you for coming up and letting me know that the fan mail question helped. Did you guys know that I take your questions on air and I protect your identity. I don't I don't reveal who said so. Even if you were to email me and tell me your name, I would never tell the public that. I usually would say this was a YouTuber or this is somebody who emailed me, so I hide where and how I got it. But if you'd like to do that, email me at clients with an S, clients, clients at carriemcavoyphd.com. And then in the subject line, put fan mail question. And I would love to be able to talk to you about whatever it is. This week's question we're answering, let me tell you what it is. I've been working on the upcoming podcast. I've got some really exciting episodes coming up. I have some super fantastic guests. Man, I am so excited about my guests. But this week's question is going to be about PTSD and guilt. How do you know when it's PTSD versus guilt? And what's the difference between the two? And next week, I'm going to be answering the question, how do you know when you're in an emotionally abusive relationship? Oh, so the person who said he wants to talk about assets is also playing the kids against you. Of course he is. It sounds like, I hate to tell you, Lisa, I'm sure you already know this. The person you're with is very manipulative. That's what I'm gathering from the little things that you're saying already. Can you watch this on YouTube? Yes, it's taped. It will be there and it becomes part of the live playlist. So you can go there and watch this anytime. Yeah, Angela at Family Court Corner is very, very good. Very good for this kind of help. So if you really want a good legal coach, you can talk to Angela at Family Court Corner. I told my ex when I told my ex I was going to divorce him, he didn't even ask why. He just asked, "What are you going to be taking from me?" Jeez. Well, talk about really clear indication of what he was looking for. I mean, yeah, that's when they reveal they reveal the truthfulness. I mean, this is what mine said to me, and we were only a year into the marriage. I said, if something bad happened to me, and because I was thinking of my late husband, something bad happened to me, um, what would you do? Would you? And he was, I'd get in another relationship right away. And I looked at him horrified. He goes, well, you would too. And I'm thinking, jeez, yeah, let's just fill in the slot. Let's just fill in the slot. um, Somebody just asked me a question. I just saw that question. Let me go back to it, see if I can find it. Somebody said, I DM'd you to need your help. Yeah, I try to help wherever I can. I try to. Yeah, the channel's name is same name as Carrie McAvoy PhD. You can find me everywhere with that handle. Who asked me a question? Yeah, they will do whatever it takes to get an advantage. I agree with you. My moderator is amazing. I was just thinking about how much I deeply appreciate my moderator. She just rocks. She does this every week for me. She doesn't even have to. She does this is out of the kindness and love of her heart. So I really, really appreciate that. Yeah, it is heartbreaking to find that their level of investment in the relationship is just it's not even skin deep. It's just for it's very transactional, very performative. It's not anything very, very much depth to it. Oh, somebody asked me about PTSD. That was the question. They wanted to know if I'm going to talk about PTSD. We're actually going to get into this. This is one of the things I'm going to reveal to the membership about 2026. So you're getting a preview for the club, but the club is going to do one of Pete Walker's books on CPTSD. So we're going to actually spend 2 months reading through his book together. So yeah, if you're interested in doing that, that would be at the top level, the premier level. You really have the most phenomenal guests and wildly interesting conversations. I appreciate that, Bera. Tomorrow, Wade Belair, I don't know how to say his last name. His dad's a famous wealthy man, and this guy was a playboy for a few years, and he's coming into Austin. He's flying in to the studio. I've rented a studio, and we're going to be interviewing in person. Wade and I are going to be interviewing in person. So I get to meet Mr. Belair tomorrow and talk about his reform, which on the tail ends of this discussion today, that should be a fascinating discussion. Why did he reform? What does it mean to reform your life? What happened to him to create change? And what does it mean for him going forward? What kinds of things is he hoping to do now that he sees what he was doing before when he was younger in a very different way? So yeah, I'm going to be interviewing him. And I'm also later this week, I'm interviewing Dr. Peter Favaro. And this is what we're going to be studying his book in the club this month, Bad People Bible. So I get to meet him on Friday. He is a forensic psychologist, and this book is a really good book. So if you're looking for some truth about dangerous, bad people, Dr. Favaro, it's not so much of it won't give you a psychological understanding. It's more of a wisdom. He's learned about being around dangerous people, wisdom, how to view dangerous people and how to see your interactions with them in life in a very different way. One of my club members said she's loving the book so much, she's going to actually read through it. She can't stop. We're going to read it for this month and next month. So she said, I already can tell I'm halfway through it and I'm not stopping this. And this is going to be a really great book. Oh, so you love Pete Walker's book. Yeah, it was life-saving. Do narcissists remain addicts even by the time that they're 70? Yeah, I don't know the research or the statistics of that, but I would assume that remains a problem. Their ability to act out would be diminished because of their health issues, but it doesn't mean that their capacity for intimacy has changed or improved. Narcissism doesn't tend to get better with age. It doesn't. Borderline personality disorders do tend to get a little bit better as they get older, but narcissists don't. All right, you guys, next week we will be talking about, let me show you what the subject will be. I know who the podcast interview is. It's about cultural and family influences in narcissism. And our topic for us is going to be when the family sides with the narcissist. We're going to talk about family when the family sides with the abuser, why family loyalty becomes complicity. So we're going to get into that with our live next week. So thank you so much, guys, for hanging out with me on Thursday or Tuesdays at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. I really appreciate it. You guys mean the world to me. I hope you know that as we come into the holidays. I just am deeply appreciative. And I will be going live. My plan is to go live all the way through the holidays. So you'll see me right through this month. I want to hang out with you guys and talk about what's going on. So I hope you'll be here with me. And but I'll see you next week, you guys. Thank you so much for being here with me. This was amazing.